All right, guys, I think we are live and we have Mr. Gourav Mohanty. I hope I'm saying that right.
It's fine. I'm
No,
not Timothy Chalamet, just pronounce my name any way you like. But it's like
uh,
Gaurav Mohanty, but it's cool. You can call me Gary,
Gourav.
Gustav, whatever it
Uh,
works.
all right, I will. I'm going to call you exactly. I'm going to call you Mr. Gourav.
Okay, perfect.
Did I get it?
Yeah, you got
Okay,
it.
good deal. So I am very honored that you chose to do an interview with me because you are very interesting. I chose you out of. There was a few people I was thinking of doing an interview with based on like epic fantasy. And you're actually the first published author that I have on here. And it was a little intimidating to be honest with you. Your book was huge it's huge. So kind of the story behind that is I got a book from Broken Binding, and it was long story short, I didn't know what I was getting. And when I opened my package, I think you've seen the video I made.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was such a cool surprise. And man, I've loved the book. It's epic, epic, epic fantasy, and I really look up to you and your work. And so yeah, I see that I'm going to try to say this word correct too. Bhubaneswar, where you were born. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about you and where you started, when you started wanting to write, and your kind of story
Yeah.
started.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Matthew, for having me here. It's such an honor to have a
Oh,
conversation with someone who, is so excited and so enthusiastic. I think I wrote that to you as on a DM as well. That I love your energy, and I saw that first when I stumbled upon a YouTube live video where you're opening that whole Broken Binding surprise, and Sons
yes,
of Darkness pops out. So that was just such a heartwarming video. So thank you for that. It really,
absolutely.
yeah. Then I saw your handle. It says Beard of Darkness. I'm like, okay, this is made in heaven. Sons
Yes, I
of
was like
Darkness.
Sons of Darkness, Beard of Darkness. I was like, man, he is right. That is made in heaven. I didn't even think about it until you wrote that to me. But yeah, absolutely.
So that was perfect. But so far as writing goes, I think my journey started in my law school. I'm also a lawyer. That's how I daylight as. And in my fifth year of law school, I was lucky to get a job in the first day. And uh, uh, so I had an entire year left where I did not have to do compulsory internships as is required. And I just decided, okay, and by this time, so a lot of cinematic things kind of converged at the same time. Like I had just finished reading the fifth book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, and there were no
Hmm.
other books in the series. And I wanted to read something similar in an Indian setting. I suddenly had a lot of time at my hand, and then I came across a very powerful Toni Morrison quote that which said something like, "If you want to read a book which has not been written yet, it's your duty to write it." uh,
Man,
you know like keeps Lady Gaga and like keeps saying this all the time because it is true. And so I just thought I'll give it a shot, and then from there on writing became a passion, wherein it was an escape from the black and white world as a lawyer that I had, because I practice in courts, I argue in courts. So
mhm.
we have the British system where we are wearing all those robes like Batman and walking around in courts. So Sons of Darkness, while creating this, was a world where I could play with color and play Thanos and reimagine an entire universe. So it became a sort of escape for me, where like fantasy is an escape where you read. I'm very privileged and honored that the muses gave me the power to also write it. So that's where my writing journey began, and 4 years later we have a book
That's
in our hands.
amazing, man. As I did my research, in America we hear like you graduate with highest honors, but so SLS is the school you went to. What does that stand for?
Symbiosis Law School.
Okay, it says that you are a gold medalist. Is that the equivalent to graduating with
Yeah,
highest honors? That's
yeah,
impressive,
it's
man.
like
You're a lawyer, you're a writer, you're published, and I found myself being very impressed with just you as a human, man. It's really cool you in your culture because I would be lying if I said I had any idea about name pronunciation, um, the Mahabharata, if I'm saying that correctly. I had no
right.
idea what that was, and I've been very pleasantly surprised in my interest in the culture. I think that's my biggest taking from all this so far. And, I'm definitely not, there's going to be rereads and note taking and all that stuff because the culture itself has just brought me in, kind of sucked me in. And I'm a little obsessed, to be honest with you. So I want to do a lot of research on the Mahabharata. Uh,
Yeah.
gosh, I hope I'm saying, I keep saying that wrong, but
I
it's an epic
you done.
Sanskrit.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Right. So, Mahabharata is one of, I mean, it is definitely the longest epic poem in the world. Like, it is equal to 10 times the size of the Iliad and the Odyssey combined, which are
Wow.
Greek epics. And it's insane. It's also a lot older. So, India has two great epics. One is the Ramayana and one is the Mahabharata. And when you said this line that you did not know about the Mahabharata before, but you came to know of it through Sons of Darkness, and that was
Yes.
like, it was the biggest takeaway, and that was my biggest objective, because I felt like India has such a treasure trove of lore and magic and epic texts that has not reached the world audience because of translation issues or just because no one has tried it yet. So I'm glad that this might open a door into discovering what a rich legacy South Asia has. You know,
Yeah.
so because
I've seen other reviews, and honestly, I'm glad that that was an objective of yours, because man, it's really happening. Because I haven't seen a single review where they didn't say that. Like, before I read this book, I had no idea what that epic was. Now I do, and it's very captivating and immersive. And you've got some characters that you take and put them in a whole different world, and it's very interesting. Um, and
Well, thank
and
you so much. Because I think in that context, and I'm so sorry, I hope I did not interrupt.
no,
So South Asia as a whole was colonized became a colony of the British Empire at one point of time. But what happened is British Empire started treating Greek classics like Troy and Iliad as high literature. Like, they became compulsory reading subjects in Oxford and Eton and other fancy universities in London. On the other hand, when it came to ancient texts of India, because of the language issue, even though Sanskrit is the mother of all languages, they did not bother translating it and reading it in depth to understand what a rich legacy we had. And as a result, I mean, we can agree on either side, but for a long period of time, the Britishers decided what was cool.
okay.
Like, yeah, I mean, in a way, historically speaking, that was accurate. And for some reason, they thought Indian literature wasn't, and Chinese literature wasn't. So slowly East Asian authors started digging into their lore and coming out with beautiful fantasy novels. Like R.F. Kuang's Poppy War is a very famous series, and that digged very deep into Chinese mythology, right? So, and that became then popular, and it opened the doors to so many other authors trying the same thing. And I'm hoping that I'm able to do the same thing with Indian mythology, bring it to a world platform and a world stage. So when reviewers read the book and say that that they did not know what Mahabharata before, and now they're googling, who Shakuni is or who Karna is, it's just a very heartwarming factor for me. So yeah.
I would bet, because just taking something that I would be passionate in, say, could be anything, and doing the same thing, bringing it across the world. I mean, you're 9.5 hours ahead of us right now. That's you're far away. I love the internet, man. I love that we can do this, and it's 12:13 here in the afternoon, and it's 9:45 there almost. So I
Yeah.
love that we can connect through this, but we connected even more, I think, through the book. Um, as our interests, mine and yours, come together, and it just creates something beautiful. So how has the journey of writing the book, we as bookish people all know how much effort and sending it out and getting published and edited and cover art, it's a lot of work. How has this journey been, and the positive response that you've got so far from your book? So how has that journey felt? Especially, I mean, you've got Broken Binding doing special editions, man. That's got to feel so cool. So
Yeah, it definitely feels like I won the Emmys award before even like coming out with the movie on it. It feels unreal every time I decide to let the feeling sink in. Like, I can't believe looking back. Like, sometimes I look at my journal from 1 year back or 2 year back, and I've written notes like, I hope the book gets published. I hope like people get a chance to read it. And it's amazing how things have changed just in a matter of 12 months. So I'm lucky and I'm privileged. And a big thank you to Matt of Broken Binding, because he actually helped me get my publisher and my agent.
wow.
Yeah, so he loved Sons of Darkness when it was still an indie book. uh, and he connected me with my agent, who's an amazing guy called Oliver. And because of their help, Sons of Darkness got adopted by Head of Zeus and Bloomsbury, and it is now where it is. So I'll always be grateful to the people around me who have helped this. And this is And this is exactly the point which you brought up, that because of globalization and internet, the world has become such a smaller place. And I love that, because I was mostly on Instagram, but a lot of people told me that, for promoting your book or talking about book, maybe you should go on Twitter. And at that point of time, Twitter in India was a very toxic place, but I still decided to dig my toes there. And
Mhm.
then I discovered this beautiful book community, where I could
It
nerd
is. It's
out.
so
Like,
beautiful.
yeah, it's so beautiful. Like, you find, like, I have an amazing group of friends, but they don't read fantasy, right? So we do not have that shared interest. But when I came on Twitter, I found like-minded individuals, right?
Mm.
And it was amazing to just like geek over different books. And those are the same guys who took my book, gave me that chance, and ended up loving it and spreading
Wow.
the word, so that that butterfly effect led to Sons of Darkness being, in your hands, in your house. So yeah.
That is incredible. Yeah, and that was all. I say it a lot too on my channel. I feel almost bad about saying this, but in a way, I don't. It's refreshing. When I really knew that I wanted to start a channel, and really, I was just going to make review videos, and I started taking these other booktubers very serious that did interviews, and it's not a comfortable thing to dive into at first. I'm comfortable with it now, but it takes that drive, or people who are interested, like this book community that you're talking about. And what a refreshing breath of fresh air it was. Just kind of, oh, you like that? Me too. Oh, you find the same thing as beautiful as I do. And it's great because they're not my neighbors, but they're
Yeah.
my friends. And I'm happy to call you a friend now. And it is. It's very, very rewarding. It's very, very inspiring, I guess I would try to say. So we know that. So it started out as an indie book,
Yeah.
and you got a publisher. So was this your, I know it's your debut book, but did you write anything prior to it? Did you send anything in? Was this your very first written book?
Yeah, it was my very first written book. Like, before this, all I've done is like write legal drafts and pleadings and petitions before courts. But this definitely was my first fiction foray, and yeah, so
That's
definitely.
impressive because I often hear, man, my first book, I want to get it taken off the internet, or this or that. And this being your first book is very impressive to me. Um,
Thank you. That means a
yeah.
lot.
Oh, absolutely. You should take it and run with that because, man, that is so special. Because, like I said, I hear the opposite so many times. So, who are three people who played? I guess let me try to word this: three influences. It could be anything that played the biggest role in you saying, "I want to be a writer."
Right. I think one thing is, I never ever thought that I would be a writer. I think I just wanted to start writing. So there was like a slight difference there, because I never thought that I had the required talent or capability to even be a writer. I started writing because it was something I want to see whether I can create a world for my own thing. It was like a
Mhm.
private D&D game that I was trying to create. I could almost picture it that way. But the three greatest influence, one has to be George R. R. Martin, because reading his book was, and even a Song of Ice and Fire series has been the North Star for me while drafting this book, because I wanted something similar in an Indian setting. So I am trying to imagine a place where I end up like meeting him. I'm sure I'm going to pass out, but I hope I'm able to take a selfie with him before I do that. So George R. R. Martin, definitely. The second influence has been my grandmother, because in India there is this tradition of grandmothers telling their grandchildren folk tales. Like, all the mythology, that tales that I've heard as a kid has been my grandma. So a lot of credit does go to her in you know instilling all these stories, and forcing me to ask questions, and not taking them at face value. So all of that has really helped me in, like, because this is a reimagination of an ancient tale, and that to a dark, grim, dark reimagination. Like, this is a religious, not a religious text really, but it has a lot of connotations of good versus evil. But I turn this into 50 Shades of Grey. So I think the fact that my grandmother encouraged me to ask questions of the lessons that we were taught through these mythology texts, that really helped me in drafting Sons of Darkness. And the third influence, that's interesting. I think I just have like two off the top of my head, but
Sure.
the third has to be the idea that, why doesn't India, the drive to have an Indian fantasy book? Because when I read the Wheel of Time series, I mean, I've just read two books of Robert Jordan. I realized that 90% of the magic system is taken from Indian mythology. And I thought that could not be a coincidence. And I checked out Robert Jordan's interviews, and he has admitted that, he was really inspired by Indian lore and Indian mythology. And I'm like, wow, it's amazing that an author has created such a beautiful series, picking up so many things from our text. And why haven't we done it yet? So the drive, the ambition to like make sure that okay, India is pitched there. I don't know, some kind of sports patriotic zeal. That definitely was the third influence where I wanted Indian text to be read by everyone outside. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up your grandmother, because one thing that I've seen, and I've watched a lot of your Instagram posts, and I love it. And America has a lot to learn from what I'm about to talk about. You and your family are so close, and I love seeing that. That is so beautiful. As a married man with four, I have my fourth child will be here in October. I think that that is something that we've kind of lost in American culture. And when I watch your videos, man, I just wanted to say bravo to that. That is beautiful. So hearing that your grandmother was a huge inspiration is really cool.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and congratulations, by the way, on your baby that's coming up.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got 3 boys, and we'll have our first girl. So yeah, we're moving along.
Amazing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. But along with the family that I wanted to take note of, what is one key? So there's lots of people that I talk to who are in the process of starting their book, or in any kind of process that it takes a lot of courage and devotion to start. What is one key piece of advice that you would give them, to somebody saying, I just don't know if I can do it, or I don't know if I'll get published, or if that even, you know what I mean? What was one key piece of advice you'd give them?
I mean, I'll definitely tell them that from the writing perspective, that do not aim for a perfect first draft. Because that's what happens with a lot of budding writers, that they write something and it's not something that is pleasing to them. It doesn't read like the book which they're trying to, ape or imitate or, compare them. Like you can't become George R.R. Martin in one day. It's like as simple as that. So, but the failure at not being able to come up with the first good chapter really cripples the entire journey for a lot of people. And I think that should change, because just go ahead, write your story. It'll work out. And every author who's like, I've read a bunch of interviews later on during the course of my journey, and I read the same thing. They all advise the same factor, that do not aim for a good first draft. So that's one. Secondly, when it comes from a publishing perspective, don't write with that perspective in hand, because just write because you're enjoying the process. Because once you put love and passion into it, it will automatically blossom into something that will be appreciated by others.
I love that.
And with internet playing such a big role, you don't really need publishers. Like you have authors like Ryan Cahill, who are doing such an amazing job publishing the books on their own. So many other self-published authors that are there. Like when I saw their journey, I was like, wow, that's amazing. So they wrote something they wrote something they really loved. And, they did not wait for someone to back them up. They decided to like go out there and the vanguard and fight the battle on their own. And that requires courage and conviction. But hey, kudos to them, it worked. And they're setting an example for a lot of other authors to follow. So, yeah.
That's incredible. So we've got a question here.
Hello, sir. What advice would you give to someone trying to write in a world inspired by India, in the sense the characters are actually speaking another language, but the writer represents it in English? See, I get the whole language issue, because you're trying to write about Indian characters and they would naturally speak in Sanskrit. But think it from the perspective of, let's say, Lord of the Rings, right? They might not, when elves are talking to each other, dwarves are talking to each other, they might not be talking in a language which is English. But do you feel that difference? You don't, because I think that's the magic of books and tales, that it transcends the tiny barriers that language imposes. So I don't think that will be an issue when you actually start writing. No one is going to think from that perspective. They are still going to be taken into that world, because when people are trying to pronounce names like Satyabhama, Krishna, these are new terms. And I'm sure at the beginning it was a little difficult. But by the time you have reached the middle of the book, these names become familiar, right? And I think that's the beauty of language. So yeah, that's what I think, at least.
You are very right. And as a reader, I wanted to just really quickly say that is true, because I had a very difficult time at the beginning of the book. By the way, the prelude is amazing. It totally sucks you in. But I had a struggle at the beginning with the names. But what you said is absolutely true. By halfway through the book, it's like muscle memory. It's just like anything else. You get through it, and in fact, you've grown as a reader. So taking anything that makes you uncomfortable at first and then mastering that can only help you anyway.
Absolutely.
This may be a friend of yours, I'm not sure, but the legal briefs were so blah that Gourav was like, writing epic fantasy would be easier.
Yeah, definitely Mihir, for sure. Again, this is Mihir from Fantasy Book Critic. He is the first guy in the whole book tweet community who took a chance on the book, and like put the book out there. And so I
Wow.
always owe a lot of the success to him.
That is
He's a
incredible,
big,
man.
big fantasy junkie. So yeah. But hey, my legal drafts were not that bad.
Uh oh. Uh oh. So I just recently saw your audio book post that you did, and where you and your family were listening to it. What a great voice, by the way, man. How do you feel about that and hearing your book being read in such a baritone, beautiful voice?
It's unreal, And like, honestly, I wish I had that voice.
Yeah.
That sounds so sexy. I wish I sounded that way. But no, I'm very lucky that Homer and Ladbroke Studios kind of put so much effort into this. And as I was saying in the video as well, that he's like an Indian Stephen Fry, like the amount of inflection he puts in. My father is again listening to the audiobook right now, and I keep passing him by, and there are certain dialogues which I know I have written it, but the way he said it, it just makes me laugh out loud because he's done such a great job, in delivering the humor right. Because dry humor sometimes is a little difficult to get in an audio sensation. Like when you're reading it, it's very funny, but it might not come out so in a visual or an audio format. But he does a grand job in getting it right. So yeah.
Yes, I can't wait to do my reread, as I like to read and listen. So that's something that I like to do with a reread, and I'm very excited to do that with yours. So how many installations do you plan on having with the, I want to pronounce this, the Ragurata? The
The
Rag?
Raghavata, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So 5 books is the plan.
Okay,
Uh, so let's see. It should be fun to like get through that. So I'm supposed to submit the second book, in fact, by September end, which is next month. And I'm
sure.
freaking out because the first 3 months of a book's publication is very important. And that somehow coincides with the last 3 months of my deadline for sending the second book.
Mm,
So it's crazy chaos at my house right now because I have to divide my time between promoting my first book and then writing the second book. It's insane.
that
But
is so
it's a lot
cool,
of fun.
man. So the next little set of questions that I came up with, and they're not spoilery, anybody that's watching, but I think that would be fun to ask about. So I love that you put griffins in this, man. It was so cool that because I really didn't know what to expect. I had read the blurb of your book, but that was totally something that caught me off guard in a great way. So what inspired you to use a griffin?
Right. So, in Indian mythos, there is a noble creature which a god rides, and he's like a giant eagle. Sometimes the paintings have depicted him like a griffin, sometimes but mostly like an eagle. And I want to do something which is not dragon, because I mean, dragons are awesome. I love dragons,
Sure.
but I think the idea of a half lion, half eagle was just something which really enamored me. Um, Also, because it was also a political statement. Because Mathura, the kingdom, the republic, is between sandwiched between two powerful kingdoms. One
Yep.
is Hastina in the north, whose symbol is the eagle, and one is Magad, the empire in the south, whose sigil is the lion.
Mm,
And now Mathura is sandwiched, and somehow it has a half griffin and a half lion thing, half eagle, half lion thing going on. So I love the whole symbolism that kind of exhibited. And also, griffins are fucking awesome. So I love that.
right, dude. Yes, exactly. That's exactly when I read that. I was like, hold on, man, this is badass. Like, absolutely. I like this
Yeah,
question. Hey,
yeah.
Gudra, for the sequel Dance of Shadows, will you try to get Michaela Alcano to do the cover? Also, which characters might grace the cover?
So, like, I just received this information, and I do not know if this is confidential, but 2 days back, I just received the confirmation that Michaela Alcano will be doing the cover for Dance of Shadows. But as to the second part, which character might grace the cover, I'm not telling now. I'm going to like gift wrap this and hopefully reveal it later. But yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Honestly, if I were you, that's what I would do. Because, anybody that is looking forward to that, which you're speaking to one, and obviously he is too. So, when we finally see it, it's going to be just that much better. One of the characters that struck me the hardest and deepest, because in fantasy, you see lots of strong female characters, but Satyabhama,
Yeah.
she is a force to be reckoned with. And was there a person that inspired you to write her, or was it just what was it?
So interestingly, when it comes to Satyabhama, like in Indian mythos, especially Hindu religion, we have a goddess of war who's Ma Durga, and that's bloody awesome.
Mm.
And in our history as well, we have a lot of badass women queens and women warriors. But somehow in our mythology, there were not, I mean, there were amazing, very powerful women who fought patriarchy to, like, show their power, like Cersei Lannister, right? But
Hmm.
we didn't have a Brienne of Tarth. I'm sorry, I'm using Game of Thrones examples to kind of explain
No,
this.
that's very good.
Right. So, but then I read this one stray line that Krishna's third wife, Satyabhama, had actually battled this one guy with a sword, and that just really enamored me. And I thought I'll flesh out this character to be this really powerful female character. Because what happens is, see, when we write something which is from our history or mythology, they are often freighted with patriarchy. Like, dams, and I've said this again a lot of times in different interviews, but we speak about damsels in distress who are
Mm.
trying to overcome stuff. I want to write about damsels who cause distress.
Yeah, I love that,
And I
man.
think
When I read that, I love that.
so. I think Satyabhama really, really fit the bill there. And in terms of inspiration, I think I drew inspiration for her from women all around me. I've been very fortunate to have friends and family members who are all powerful women in their own right.
Mm.
One of the most like strongest inspirations was my friend Astha, who sometimes when you're writing characters, you kind of tend to, I mean, to make different characters unique, you give them subtle traits and subtle habits which define them. So Asta was my roommate, and I used a lot of her characteristics and put it in Satyabhama, so that
Sure.
those tiny intricacies were there, and I'm glad that it really worked. So
Yeah, it certainly comes across, because when you read her character, that it was something that you wrote with heart, because she's a very strong character, and one of my favorites for sure. And I think, to cover a little bit of the magic, I think that when I read about the links, what was your idea behind the links? Because it just made sense. Like, a lot of times you read magic in a book and it kind of takes a getting used to, or maybe it's a little complex. But as soon as I started reading about links, maybe explain a little bit behind your
the
inspiration behind using the links.
the links. Do you mean the chakras?
Yeah,
The
I'm
mandala?
so
Yeah,
sorry. Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. So one of India's biggest soft power exports, especially in the recent time, has been yoga. Like the West love the yoga. Yoga has become a big thing around the world, and that's an Indian export. Now, what happens with yoga? And then, if you go back and deeper into the mysticism and spirituality of it, there were a lot of concepts like chakras, which we have like these focal points of energy in our body, which we
Mhm.
can, elevate by meditation. That's the whole idea. And in fact, Naruto, if anyone has seen the anime Naruto, those characters who fight use chakras as a system. Now, this is something which has come from Indian lore. I wanted to turn this into a magic system. Like, it's a spiritual system in our existing society. I want to turn this into like a way to murder someone. That's why the assassin's apprentice in Sons of Darkness is trying to, get her systems unlocked so that she can ascend to a slightly higher God mode. Let me call it, like, try to ascend God mode, where she can fight better and kill better. So that's the idea. Like, because like the way Chinese have acupuncture, which means there are different points in the body which, if they stick it with pin, they can do a lot of stuff, nerve damage to nerve healing.
Mhm.
Indian system has chakras. Like, we have 7 main chakras, and there are a lot of other chakras in our body. So I wanted to use the magic system there, derived from this, but keep it subtle. Like, as I said, A Song of Ice and Fire has been my inspiration. So the magic system is something subtle in the background, and in my world currently, the magic is gone. Like, it no longer exists. It's like a
Mhm.
thing that is there. Will it come back? Will it not? So
So
yeah.
I think that clears a lot of things up for me, because, like I said at the beginning of this, and I apologize for my misnomer. the chakras was, I've heard of the word chakra, but I didn't know personally the background. And I'm so glad you just cleared that up, because all of a sudden it's like things are making a lot more sense to me. So thank you. Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, one of my favorite pages, asked Gourav, for book 2, do you plan to make a short recap of book 1 at the front of the book? It's so helpful to us fantasy readers.
Thank you so much, man. It's actually a great suggestion. I mean, I would love to do that, because I understand that when you're coming in a small recap, the same way when we watch the second season of any show which we like, and they have a short recap at the starting, it does kind of refresh your memory. So yeah, I would love to do that, But right now, my target is just finishing the goddamn second book, because it's like there's so many amazing things that are happening there. I'm just trying to get all together. But yes, Matt, noted. I will do that.
That's a great idea. So I also wanted to touch on, so we know that when you read the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire, that is something that highly inspired you. What are a couple others? I said 3 in the question, but I think that we know number 1 is the Game of Thrones. What are 2 other books that you recommend that me or the readers read before we die?
Definitely. So when it comes from the fantasy genre, there's so many beautiful books out there. So it's so difficult. It's like asking someone which is your favorite song.
Yeah, it's
And
so hard.
It's so hard. I mean, it changes with every week, right? But I would definitely say that Lies of Locke Lamora from the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch is so amazing. The character development and the kind of scenes he writes was something which was beautiful for me. Like, I laughed out loud. And so definitely that book. When it comes to the third book that I would recommend, I would definitely say that, and something off fantasy, maybe I'll say read Second Hand Time, which deals with the fall of Soviet Union. And I have read about that in history, but the way the book has been written, that's the only book where I got really emotional at the point of like having tears come off my eyes, because it was just the fall of an empire. She analyzes it from such a beautiful anthropological perspective. I felt like I'm reading a real life version of Malazan. I don't know if you've read Malazan series.
I've
That
started
deals a lot. Yeah, and Malazan is very difficult actually to get into at the starting. It's insanely difficult.
Yeah.
But once you get through that, like first half of Garden of the Moon, it just sinks into you. So, in fact, actually, I'm so sorry, but when you asked me that inspiration behind writing the book is some influences that kind of helped me write this book. I think Malazan was a great influence, because Steven Erikson, in his author's note to Gardens of the Moon, once Gardens of the Moon became very successful, wrote this one line that authors go for the throat, don't hold back. It doesn't matter if anyone understands that or not. You do you, and I love that. So yeah.
I do love that. That's a very powerful saying, and left up into interpretation, we can all come up with something a little different for how we view that.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you, where can we? I know this answer obviously, but I want you to tell the viewers, where can we view and buy your books, get the blurbs, know more about you and what you're planning on doing?
I'm very active on Instagram. Definitely using my family as a muse. I keep making fun of them, and they keep threatening that they will disinherit me from their property. So that's a lot of fun on Instagram. My book is available on Amazon, and definitely. But if you have a local bookstore which has Sons of Darkness, please support your local bookstores. I think that's so important. But in case if it's not there, you can get it at your nearest bookstore. Sons of Darkness officially releases in US next year in January, because my publishing house has been taken by Bloomsbury US, so they're shifting to their distributors, and so it's going to release in January in the US. Everywhere else, I'm hoping that the book is in the closest bookstore to you, or Amazon it. Yeah.
Okay,
but
great.
Know about me, please follow me on Instagram, or just like look at it. And it's just not about books. I try and make you guys laugh as well. I'm a stand-up comic on the side, so there are a few jokes here and there. So
yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. A lawyer, a comic, an author. What can't you do? So it's very impressive. So we went through a lot of the questions that I had for you really quick. Is there any thing else that you'd like to touch on? We're in no rush or hurry. So I would love if you had any topics you'd like to cover.
Definitely. I could talk about some interesting things that are going to happen in the second book without really getting into spoiler territory,
Oh, I'd
because
love
the
that.
second, the second book is called Dance of Shadows, and I really wanted to make it very different from what Sons of Darkness has been. So you have a heist, and the kind of characters that are coming in are like there's one. We have this concept called Devdasi, which is very similar to geisha. These were
Hmm.
women who were born with a fault in the stars that okay they cannot marry someone, so they used to be married off to gods in a symbolic marriage, and they used to dance in temples, and they were trained in the art of dance, seduction, and music. And
Okay.
they were Devdasis, and they were considered very powerful in the hierarchy. So there's this one character who's like that, and there's a librarian as well, because I thought that was like epic. I really wanted to write a librarian perspective character, and I'm glad that I
Sure.
was able to do that in Dance of Shadows. So you have a lot of interesting characters coming in, and we are also going to learn about what happened to Karna and Mati, because in Sons of Darkness, in the second half, some characters we do not know what really happens to them, where the journey has gone. So in Dance of Shadow, those answers are revealed. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I
Uh,
think I can't wait for that. And yeah, you're right. You wonder, but I mean, knowing that it's going to be a multiple installation series, it kind of leaves you less upset about that and more just like hopeful. I can't wait to find out this, and the anticipation for the next book is there.
yeah, so I'm really glad that that happened, because I didn't want Sons of Darkness to end on a cliffhanger, because I know that like it really bothers me. Like, oh come on,
Right.
So there's a sort of closure that you get, but there are a lot of seeds that are left that will germinate a lot later. So hoping that I was able to do both, but yeah, let's see. And as a
That's
writer,
great.
also you keep growing, right? What I was as a writer last year and right now is very different, because we keep growing in whatever careers we have chosen. So when I'm writing it, and I'm moving a lot faster, because I used to watch these videos of Brandon Sanderson about
Hmm.
writing. They're so amazing. That man,
Yes.
I like he should get Nobel Peace Prize because of this
Are you talking
beautiful
about his
video.
lectures?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, they're
absolutely.
great. They're great.
So and he chose not to profit out of it. He just decided to like let it go on YouTube, and that was gold. Like I think a lot of writers, including me, owe him.
Anybody
So
who's writing a book, especially fantasy, I mean,
mm,
you don't even have to write fantasy to get a lot out of his lectures,
yeah,
but
yeah.
boy, if you do, he really covers everything. It's a tool that you have to utilize. I 100% agree with you because I want to dabble in writing myself, and I've kind of started something a little. I'm kind of the guy that I was asking about earlier. Um, you know, with the self doubt and stuff like that we always have as we start this huge adventure or this huge taking of writing a book. So that's very helpful. And to know that you got a lot of your inspiration through the same thing that inspired me is really cool too. This Sons of Darkness is an epic fantasy in the purest way. The characters are vivid. The lore is something that I'm still learning as we talk. This is going to be one of those books that in series that I don't know that I'll ever stop learning more and more about your culture and how I want it to be a part of my life and to know more about it. So I just wanted to thank you for writing it. The characters are so like there's not a lot of books. I would say Joe Abercrombie, George R. R. Martin are just a couple that I can name that if I'm reading the dialogue, I know who they're speaking about or who that character is. And you've really done a great job with that. So
Thank you.
that's a very hard thing to do. Reading your dialogue throughout this, I know who was speaking. Um,
I mean, thank
so
you. That means a lot. Because
you're
I'm so sorry to interrupt you there, because this is
no,
one thing which I picked up from Brandon Sanderson's YouTube lecture. By the way, it's insane, because he says that after a point of time, your dialogue should flow in such a way that your reader figures out who's talking without you having to say that this person said this or this person said that. And that really stayed with me, so that I give each one a slightly different speaking style, or someone is slightly sarcastic, someone slightly naive, so it kind of makes sense. You know exactly when Karna is talking or when Shakuni is talking. So yeah.
yes, you're very all the characters are so vivid and they're their own little way. Like you said, you changed how you wrote each character a little bit, and And to me, as somebody who wants to write that way, it seems like such a hard thing to do, to have, you've got a lot of main characters, but then you've got even more secondary characters. And that's one thing I would say. If you're a little overwhelmed at first, I think that that's a good thing, because I was, and with the names and me not being able to, you know,
Yeah.
we're lazy in our speech in English. You're not. So it absolutely makes it worth it. So you get through the first 20% of the book, and then everything flows so beautifully, and you set it up beautifully with the politics. And I just really wanted to reiterate the lore, the epic world building, the vivid characters, the dialogue. You guys absolutely need to read this book. And really, that's my take on this.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was like really generous. Wow, I love that. I
Thank
mean, I
you.
know it's like I'm narcissistic right now and stuff something, but it's just so good to hear that whenever a reader really gets what I was trying to do and write. And so, thank you so much for reading through the book and finding all those little nuggets which I'd left around and appreciating it. It means really a lot to me. So,
I'm glad, because, buddy, you've got a reader for life. I absolutely say that 100%. So if there's no more any other topics you'd like to cover, I just would like to reiterate what I've already said. You guys need to read the book. It's, if you're a fantasy lover, if you love epic fantasy, the world. Oh, here, I want to put this up here. This is very. So that's great. Good. Thank you, Caden, for commenting. That's great. Finished it today and absolutely loved it. So again, epic fantasy, the lore is great, the world building, the characters, you guys need to pick it up. And if you have nothing else, Gourav, I would love to tell you thank you so much for coming on my channel. I've learned more in this interview than I have in any of my other interviews as far as literary topics and ideas go. So I would like to just thank you again, and we'll keep in touch. And I can't wait for book number 2.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. And I wish you all the best with your book. And I hope I get a chance to read it soon. So,
oh,
good
man,
luck.
that's very inspiring. Thank you so much. Well, hey, guys, thank you for tuning in to Beard of Darkness book reviews. And Gourav, I hope you have a great night. And we'll see you guys next time.
Cheers.